12 men in polished suits sat in a locked room, plotting the fate of millions, their whispers echoing behind closed doors. And yet one man, uninvited, unwelcome, was listening to every word. That paradox shook the very soul of Africa. While 12 presidents gathered in Abidjan under the shadow of Paris, their voices circled around a single figure, Captain Ibrahim Traoré of Burkina Faso. To them, he was not just a young soldier who seized power. He was a dangerous idea, an infection of courage spreading like wildfire across borders, a spark that threatened to ignite a continent long betrayed by its rulers. But here lies the question: what is truly dangerous? A leader who dares to demand sovereignty, or a system that rewards submission and dependency? For half a century, Africa's wealth, gold, oil, uranium, flowed endlessly outward, enriching foreign capitals while children at home died in hospitals with no medicine, while villages sat in darkness, and while entire nations were told they could not afford the very schools and hospitals their resources should have built. Every year, billions vanished not by mistake, but by design, siphoned into offshore accounts, padded contracts, and Parisian mansions owned not by the people, but by their leaders. And when one young man rose to expose this theft, suddenly, the excuse of regional stability became the mask for conspiracy. The story of Ibrahim Traoré is not just the story of Burkina Faso. It is the eternal struggle between dignity and dependence, between truth and the comfortable lies that protect power. This is the story of how one man turned a secret meeting meant to bury him into the loudest funeral of corruption in modern African history. So I ask you, if sovereignty is celebrated in the West, why is it feared when demanded in Africa? For decades, Burkina Faso's story was not written in Ouagadougou, but in Paris, Washington, and corporate boardrooms far from the Sahel. The so-called Old Order was built on invisible chains trade agreements that favored outsiders, military bases justified by fear, presidents rewarded not for serving their people, but for serving foreign interests. In this system, a kilogram of Burkina Faso's gold left the ground worth nearly $60,000, yet less than 2,000 returned to the nation's treasury. The rest disappeared into the hands of elites. This was not only an economic crime, it was a betrayal woven into tradition. And Burkina Faso was not alone. Across West and Central Africa, oil and uranium filled foreign pockets, while citizens remained trapped in poverty, their nations rich in resources, yet poor in opportunity. The IMF itself admitted that in just 2 decades, sub-Saharan Africa lost over $1 trillion to illicit financial outflows, enough to build every hospital, every school, and every power plant the continent was told it could never afford. And yet, this theft was disguised as stability. The presidents in Abidjan defended their rule by pointing to aid packages, foreign investments, and staged elections. But beneath their polished smiles lay fear. Fear of their own youth, fear of exposure, fear that the example of Burkina Faso under Ibrahim Traoré would prove another path was possible. And that fear is the contradiction at the heart of the old order. For to keep their palaces, they sold sovereignty. To maintain foreign approval, they denied dignity. And to silence one voice in Ouagadougou, they conspired 12 against 1. But what they underestimated was that sovereignty, once spoken, cannot be unsaid. A generation raised on social media, armed with smartphones more powerful than state censors, was already listening. The stage was set, the old order clinging to privilege, and the young captain daring to redefine the future. Ibrahim Traoré was the youngest head of state in the world when he seized power in Burkina Faso, dismissed by commentators in Paris as reckless, too young, too bold, too unwilling to play the old game. But to millions across Africa, he was exactly what they had been waiting for, a leader unafraid to speak aloud what everyone already knew, that colonialism had never truly ended. It had only changed its disguise. And in the months that followed, his actions proved his words. He renegotiated gold contracts, forcing foreign companies to pay a fairer share. And within a year, Burkina Faso's mining revenues surged by over 300%. That money put food on tables, medicine in hospitals, and salaries in the hands of workers abandoned for decades. It was power not by decree, but by performance, and the people noticed. Mothers in markets, students in classrooms, soldiers in neglected barracks, all felt the change. Yet as the people gained hope, the region's rulers grew restless. They saw the T-shirts of their youth bearing Traoré's face. They heard his words echoing across Africa. Africa is not poor. Africa is being robbed. His message was short, sharp, unforgettable, and it was spreading like wildfire. In Abidjan, the 12 presidents conspired. Their plan was precise. Isolate Burkina Faso, choke its economy, expel it from regional bodies, intimidate it with military exercises, and if all else failed, call in a French-backed intervention. But what they did not know was that Traoré's intelligence network had infiltrated their summit. A waiter in the hotel was an undercover agent. A technician had bugged the conference room. And one of the presidents themselves, Thomas Kabade of Guinea-Bissau, was secretly allied with Traoré. Every word spoken behind closed doors was carried back to Ouagadougou. So when the conspirators returned home, believing they had buried him in secrecy, Traoré stepped to a podium with a thick folder in hand. Calmly he began. Over the past 48 hours, 12 African presidents met in Abidjan to discuss what they call the Traoré problem. I was not invited, but I did not need to be. I heard every word. And page by page, he read their own. Statements allowed their admissions of bribes, their plans at economic strangulation, their fear that his ideas were spreading like a virus. He exposed their bank transfers, their French mansions, their betrayal of their people. The press erupted. Citizens across Africa watched in disbelief, and what was meant to be his downfall became their disgrace. The shockwaves spread like fire. In Senegal, youth poured into the streets. In Gabon, the military began questioning loyalty to their president. In Chad, generals refused orders from a leader now exposed as a foreign puppet. Traoré seized the moment. He expelled French military advisors, gave them 72 hours to leave, withdrew Burkina Faso from ECOWAS, and declared that any organization plotting against its own members had lost legitimacy. But he did not stop there. He called for a new African summit, not of presidents, but of people. Youth movements, unions, women's groups, civil society. The real Africa, he declared, will decide its future. And in that moment, a continent awoke. On social media, hashtags surged, memes mocked the 12 presidents, musicians composed songs, murals of Traoré appeared in Lagos and Dakar, painted beneath the words, "Sovereignty is not negotiable." Even investors, drawn by the wave of transparency, began knocking at Burkina Faso's door. The plot that was meant to strangle him had instead elevated him into a symbol. He became the voice of dignity against betrayal, of sovereignty against servitude. And though his enemies hoped to silence him, they had only amplified his message. You cannot kill an idea whose time has come. The Abidjan conspiracy was meant to end his story, but instead it lit the flame of a continental awakening. From Ouagadougou to Nairobi, from Paris to Washington, the echoes could no longer be contained. The people had heard the truth, and once a people have heard the truth, no palace, no foreign army, no conspiracy can stop them. The question that remains is not whether Ibrahim Traoré will survive, but whether Africa itself will finally choose the road of dignity over the road of dependency. And history, once written in foreign capitals, is now being rewritten in the streets of Africa.